Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and mysterious, true glitch stories, including the paranormal. Case file number 53, written by user TrafalgarDLaw. It's an expedition at night in the rainforest. 40 minutes push by seemingly instantaneously, but only for him. Phone batteries drained. What the hell happened? I've wanted to share this story for a while and finally convinced myself that it would be worth this subreddit's time. This is a relatively mild experience compared with a lot of things I've read on the sub, but it is still 100% true, and it's the strangest thing I've ever experienced. As part of my university degree, I went to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico to do field surveys in various parts of the rainforest. We traveled across several sites looking at plants, animals, and doing a bunch of tests. This one site in particular was a sectioned off part of the rainforest about 2 miles in diameter that was semi-managed by the government. We went there once in a day walking around the site, did our tests, and then went back to the hotel. The rest of the day we were allowed to relax and study our notes. Then in the evening, we headed back there to study the nightlife in the rainforest. We arrived at the site, unpacked our gear, and paired up with our buddies or groups, then went into the rainforest. We had one torch per group, so a lot of us used the torches on our phones to see where we were going. We walked around the same route as we had in the day, and I was vigilant in checking my phone and its battery because I was terrified of getting lost in the dark in the rainforest. We were just over halfway with the loop around the site, and I was sitting comfortably at about 80% battery, as I had the foresight of fully charging before heading out. Then nothing. The last thing I remembered was admiring the reflection of the eyes of the crocodiles intently keeping watch over our group. Then when I came back to, I was on the other side of one of the villages that we had seen earlier in the day, alone. My phone was at 1% battery. I was completely separated from my group, and I remember just staring into this old abandoned hut with the dim light of my phone. I immediately started to panic before I heard the laughter from another group on the opposite side of the village about 50 feet away. I rushed over and formed up with them. When I eventually reconnected with my group, they were worried and said that I was walking along, not saying anything at all, and then when we reached the village, they lost sight of me. It's like I was on autopilot. I've tried to be as rational as I can, thinking about the experience. I was tired, getting used to a new climate, and arguably not as hydrated as I should have been, which could have all contributed to this mental blackout. However, it is important to note that I have a phenomenal memory, as that is how I have learned to study, and to completely forget what would have been a 40-minute walk through the rainforest at night is incredibly unlike me. Thinking back on the event, I still get chills, and the more I try to rationalize it, the more I feel like something unexplainable happened that night. My only comfort is that apart from the fear of being abandoned in the rainforest at night, I never felt threatened or in any danger. Edit. To address some more questions I've received, we were put into groups of 3 or 4, and there were 8 groups there walking in a straight line, about 20 feet apart from each other, with the lecturers leading the front and back. I've talked to a few people and done a few Google searches, and I'm not discounting the possibility that I may have had some sort of physical ailment or dissociative episode. The only thing that still eludes me is how I would have managed to walk away without being noticed by anyone, and how much my phone immediately drained in that short period. Case notes, file number 53. So yeah, the phone battery draining is the detail that caught my attention the most, since outside of that, it's certainly conceivable that a human being could black out for 40 minutes. Though that would still be very strange in an otherwise healthy person. But the battery did drain, from 80% to 1% in 40 minutes. Even with the flashlight open the entire time, at least on my phone, that wouldn't do much, maybe to 50%, and my phone isn't new. I can't explain the battery drain, so it makes me think something else happened here. I know what I want to say. Aliens! But yeah, I'm not sure. Doesn't seem likely either though, because there were so many people around, 30 people. You'd think someone would have spotted a UFO, right? What do you think? Case file number 54, written by user ParanormalNexus. What is it like to live in the same haunted house growing up for many years? Find out now. It's taken me a long time to come to terms with what happened in my house in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm finally ready to share. To give a little background, my family, mom, dad, older brother, and I moved to Tennessee in 1995 from Mexico. We moved to a very old ranch-style home in Knox County and did not realize that this home would be the site of some of the most harrowing and terrifying experiences I would ever experience. I'm convinced that many occurrences have been suppressed in my mind, but I want to share with you the memories I do remember. My hand is shaking as I type this out, as these experiences haunt me to this day and are not easy to talk about. The activity in the house first began with the usual paranormal stuff you hear about. Missing items, misplaced or moved belongings, strange creaks and noises around the house. Nothing that can't logically be explained away. It wasn't until we decided to add a room to the home about 4 to 5 months in that crap began to hit the fan. I started to experience unusual things a few times a week, to almost every single night thereafter. To give some perspective as to the layout of the home, upon entering, the living room is the first thing you see. To the left is a small hallway leading to my parents' bedroom. To the right of the living room is a very long and narrow hallway that leads to a guest room, then the room my brother and I shared for a short while. The hall ends with a bathroom and the entryway to the kitchen, with an extra room directly across from my brother and I's room. Essentially, my room was on the complete opposite end of the house from my parents' room. Anyways, now that the picture is set, I will describe several of my experiences. While my brother slept in the room, I would experience nightly terrors in which I would see someone standing in my doorway. It would never move, but the only way to describe it was a tall, shadowy figure with noticeably long, white string-like hair. It would watch me several times a week, and I would feel so terrified that all I would be able to do is cover my head with my blanket and pray it would go away. I told my parents what I had seen after the first night, but they merely chalked it up as me having a nightmare. Typical. Eventually, I got to a point where I began to sleep on my side with a blanket over my head, with a small opening for me to look through. This continued on for 2 years until my brother got a room to himself. That's when things took a turn for the worst. I remember sleeping at night and seeing the same shadowy figure standing at my doorway. Feeling just as terrified as the previous time seeing it, I did the usual go-to and covered my face with my blanket, hoping upon covering myself it would be gone. This time was very different. Upon covering my face, the same figure was standing in the room merely feet from my bed. I panicked and covered my head again, wondering if I was going mad. Upon uncovering my head once again, I saw that it had gone, and with a sigh of relief, I turned onto my back. This was not a good move. Upon turning onto my back, I saw the same figure was now floating over my bed on the ceiling. I was on the top bunk, so you can imagine how close it is now. The only way I can accurately describe this humanoid-like entity is that it looked like a mix of gray alien with a very tall crypt keeper from that one show. The second I saw it, I covered my face once again and felt petrified, overcome with fear. I then felt the figure lay on top of me as I lay frozen on my back. I remember hearing it breathing, sounding like a quiet, almost asthmatic wheeze, and how cold its breath felt. I remember the distinct earthly smell emanating from its mouth as it breathed inches from my face, the only barrier being my blanket. It felt like hours passed, frozen in terror, feeling completely helpless. This occurrence was something that began to happen almost every night, and only happened to me. Maybe because I was the youngest. Throughout my time living in that house, things progressively got worse. I would be lying in my bed reading a book with all the lights on, when I would begin to hear scratching under my bed. I would peek under and be overcome with the same paralysis I would feel at night, and the feeling of the figure lying on top of me. I would feel it pull me off my bed and onto the floor in the middle of my room and stare into my soul as I kept my eyes closed in sheer terror. My mom would later recount several times in which she would walk into my room and see me lying in the middle of the room on my back. She would ask me what I'm doing, to which I would essentially snap out of it and tell her I was fine, too scared to talk about what had happened. I remember if I slept on my chest, I would feel like a force would pick me up, 2 to 3 feet, by my shirt and drop me back onto my bed. This happened so often that to this day, I am reluctant to sleep on my chest, not because I'm afraid I'll be picked up. I'm now a 220-pound adult man, good luck, but because something in my subconscious mind tells me that it's not a good position to be in. My parents would tell me that I just had nightmares all the time, but they did not realize this nightmare was something I had experienced every night. Years later, having endured this every night, I began to see an additional apparition in the home. I began to see a young boy in the long stretch of a narrow hallway that my bedroom was situated in. I would see him peeking out of different rooms at me while I was in the hallway, then disappear out of sight into rooms, only to see he had disappeared completely upon my investigation. That would be the extent of my interaction with him, but I would see him often and only during the daytime. The apparition did not appear to be malicious, unlike the other figure that tormented me at night. He gave me the impression he was merely an observer, which was comforting in a way, that this ghost did not want to mess with me, unlike the Crypt Keeper entity. Over a decade later, now living in Atlanta, I decided to look up the address on Google Maps to show a friend, and noticed that the home was now the site of a home business. Upon seeing that, I decided that I would reach out to them out of curiosity, and see if they had any similar experiences. The business would later reply, saying that there were frequent electrical issues, and that other strange things occurred frequently. He told me that his wife and kids complained about seeing a little boy wandering around the hallway, and were scared to live in the home. The man also described seeing a tall shadow occasionally when he was working in his office, which turned out to be my old bedroom. He told me he always felt like he was being watched, and felt generally uneasy in that room in particular. What is peculiar about this is I had not described any of my experiences before him telling me this, yet our stories appeared to line up perfectly. I showed my parents the message thread I had with this business, and it was then that they confirmed that they believed the house was haunted. They didn't want to say anything that would scare me even more, and tried to bury it under the guise that I was having nightmares. My mother said that she would see the same little boy wandering around the kitchen and hallway, and she always had the feeling of being watched when no one was home but her. Neither of them had seen the tall figure, and it seemed it was focused on me. The experiences I had in that home are permanently burned into my mind, and I will never forget that tall, wired-haired figure that constantly picked me up, laid on me, and pulled me around, terrifying me to the core. I don't plan to ever return to that home, and I pray that no one who has the misfortune of living there experiences what I did on a nightly basis for 6 freaking years. I've always been curious about deep hypnosis, and what it may reveal to me, but I'm equally terrified to remember events that my mind deemed too traumatic to keep from my conscious mind. Case Notes, File Number 54. My God, what a distressing childhood this must have been for you. I used to think there weren't any malevolent spirits, but I'm not sure this is the case anymore. This is more than just wanting to hurt you, too. It was pure psychological torment. Sadistic. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and also subscribe on up. I'm always uploading more of these fascinating stories.